LCS Countdown starts right now.
Welcome back to the LCS Dome, presented by State Farm, where teams competing today are playing for their playoff lives as we get our first matches in the lower bracket. That's right, third day in a row here in the LCS postseason. The new 8-team format just gives us tons of games, and I'm loving it. Golden Guardians, they flipped the script on Thursday. Evil Geniuses and FlyQuest, they did us a favor yesterday by delivering a back-and-forth 5-game series. Let's talk about that one. Santorin, we'll start with him.
Yeah, he was a player of the series for a good reason. He was super consistent throughout the entire thing, and it was a very hard-fought series. Anytime it goes the full 5 games, everyone's going to have step-up moments. Everyone's going to make big plays. People are going to make bad plays as well, but Santorin was definitely the biggest factor, I think, in FlyQuest's victory. Not only setting his team up very well, but around objectives, finding a lot of steals.
Yeah, and even his stats look pretty for this series. He had 3 kills for the 3 wins and 2 deaths for the 2 losses. But really, what's probably the most impressive thing, and I don't want to sensationalize it, he had about 1 billion assists?
About $1 billion. Yeah, it was close to
around $1 billion, give or take.
Roughly. Give or take $1 billion. It was roughly $1 billion. Crumbs, we didn't have you on the desk yesterday, so get in here. What was your impressions of that best of 5?
I thought that it was going to be a lot more lopsided when I saw FlyQuest get off to such a hot start. So I thought, okay, yeah, EG should be done, but they actually clawed back, which got me a little bit worried for FlyQuest, but it just reminded me of their spring split run where they were just trying to maximize their playoff time to ramp up at the end. So I actually think it's going according to plan for FlyQuest.
There it is, all according to plan. Let's talk a little bit about the meta that developed within that series. Most specifically, I'm interested in Senna as a pick. Is this something that we should be seeing more often, or does this feel like it was, very much a Bang-centric pick, a series-centric pick?
I think this was definitely a bit of the meta evolving in this series. Yeah, Bang does not have a wide champion pool, wasn't playing the Caitlyn. And Turtle was having such good performances on the Ashe and Caitlyn that he eventually got them banned and then took the Senna away from Bang. So Bang had to go back on the Ezreal, which is in a bit weaker of a state now. So this is kind of an interesting development. I kind of like the strategy of taking away picks from your opponent, but I don't think Senna is going to be that high priority. We'll see it, I think, when things fall through, but I don't expect it to be as high priority as yesterday.
Yeah. I think the Senna is a champion that you want to have if you're not particularly comfortable with the Ashe or the Caitlyn side of that 2v2, and it also makes it so that your support can be a lot more flexible and still have a solid laning phase that you're not necessarily getting crammed into the back of your turret and just farming away. So if you're trying to just split even, you can go with Senna and almost always get that going.
Now, while the results of both of our best of 5 so far have been somewhat surprising, the upset with Golden Guardians over TSM and then, of course, a full 5-game series yesterday, I think what adds to the surprise is how quickly Team Liquid picked Golden Guardians as their opponents with choice mark. They chose the 3-0 team, not the team that struggled through.
It was really surprising, and I think it comes down to a lot of teams prioritizing more what they've seen in regular season and scrims than what they saw in this playoffs, which was, to be fair, a single best of 5 against a certain matchup in your opponent. And so Team Liquid going back more on what they have seen out of FlyQuest in the regular season and probably in scrims, saying that's kind of scary. Let's go with Golden Guardians. And so even though Golden Guardians looked way better and more dominant in their series, they're obviously not reading too far into that. And besides, we've heard Jensen have a pretty low opinion on TSM in general. So maybe he doesn't even think it's that surprising that Golden Guardians won.
I also think that FlyQuest is a really bad mismatch for Team Liquid. They are both capable of just playing early game a little bit more passive and going for mid to late game. And the matchups in the lanes are so even that the normal advantages that you'd expect from Team Liquid's players, say maybe Jensen in the laning phase, he's not going to have them against PoE. And Santorin being so consistent could actually be a really difficult jungler to play for against Broxah. So I think that going away from someone that is so close to your style and might actually have better players at the moment is a very risky play.
If I recall correctly, Crumbs, you had FlyQuest beating Team Liquid in a matchup if they do go up against each other for their ticket to the finals, correct?
Yeah, I do think that this is like I'm not sure that FlyQuest is actually the best team. I just think that they can beat Team Liquid because it is a mismatch.
Of course, they're going to have to get through Cloud9 to have an opportunity at Team Liquid. So let's talk about that because it's a rematch of our spring finals. This time, though, the teams are sitting in the 2-3 positions.
Feels really different compared to spring. C9 was at the height of their dominance, I think, by the end of spring. And FlyQuest, in a lot of ways, was still kind of ramping up, figuring out their footing with Solo. They had only started, being dedicated to him in the playoffs, and now they've had a whole split with him. They did have their swaps with MASH this split, but I think FlyQuest is looking better than they ever have, and on the same time, C9 has been slumping the entire back half of playoffs, and we're all confused about how they're going to look in the actual best of 5.
Yeah, looking for Cloud9 to step it back up. We'll see if FlyQuest can challenge them. Of course, those games take place next week. The LCS is filled with critical historical moments that define careers, but we ask questions like, what if Jensen hit Zonias at the right time? What if Huni's top lane Lucian actually swept in playoffs? And now as we head into our break, these are the possibilities we're exploring in our newest segment, Great Moments in Fake History.
In the 2019 Spring LCS Finals, Team Solomid is hoping to stop Team Liquid on their way to their third straight championship victory. TSM took the first 2 games and had to fight against the dreaded reverse sweep. TSM got off to a strong start, and by 30 minutes were up in gold, kills, drakes, and looked to be marching towards a win. The critical moment would come at 34 minutes in, when Sven spots Xmithie's Skarner trying to secure the Spire near Baron. And instead of risking the game, Sven literally just doesn't walk there. He does a complete 180 and walks away until he's with his team, robbing Team Liquid of their last shot to get back into the game.
This is a moment that Sven will never forget.
Sven would become the first player to win both in NA and EU, but he announced he wouldn't stop until he'd won in every region. After a successful split and championship in the Turkish League, Sven would move to play in Brazil's CBLOL. Unfortunately, he wouldn't find the same success. Years spent toiling in Sao Paulo would push him to the breaking point. Failing to win a championship here meant the death of his dream. Sven's longtime partner, Mithy, would travel to South America and plead with his old friend to return to the safety of Europe. Realizing he must reunite with Mithy to find his passion, the two returned to Denmark and found the League of Legends Danish Championship, LDC, stealing back all their players from both the LCS and LEC to create the world's premier region.
Welcome back to the LCS Countdown, where we're gearing up for TSM versus Dignitas by looking at the Samsung SSD Fast 5. And specifically for playoffs, we're going to take a look at how these two teams match up. We're looking at 5 statistical categories. Now, these are the averages of each of the teams, not their fastest mark within the regular season. So you can see here TSM eclipsing Dignitas in all categories except for that average first tower take. Mark, your initial impressions here?
I mean, the first one that I look at actually is the first Drake, because you can't see it on here, but that's actually TSM is first in first Drake time, whereas Dignitas is last. And with how important Drake is in these series that we've seen so far, and forcing soul point on people, which forces them to fight you, it is something that I want to track. Because it also comes down to how the bot lane is playing, because TSM's bot lane in postseason was not doing that well. They lost Drake control.
Yeah.
Raleigh?
Honestly, I'm not too surprised that TSM's beating them in all the categories. You know, TSM finished in top 4 and Dignitas was bottom. They had 13 losses and 5 wins. So, of course, they can't have great stats and still lose. But the first tower, yeah, I got to say that has to be a Herald usage or their focus on bot lane. So that's kind of impressive that they're beating TSM. When we think of TSM, we think, strong early game, messy mid game. But the fact that they're losing in first tower is pretty interesting for Dig.
I have a hard time putting too much value on these stats because of the difference in roster that Dignitas had before they actually switched things up and weren't on that second half of the split with a win streak, because they started 0-8, different roster, and it was just abysmal. And then even after they actually got some of those wins, their losses were so abysmal that this team's feast or famine style, I think, just translates brutally for statistics.
Yeah, one other wrench I want to throw in here, Mark. You cited those first Dragon stats, and while they are skewed heavily in favor of TSM when it comes to time, interestingly enough, TSM has only secured 6 total first Dragons in their games, whereas Dignitas has secured 8. So Dignitas ends up with first dragon more often. However, it comes later within the game itself. So again, so many sides to every story. And as you mentioned here, Crumbs, moving into the postseason, I'm curious to see what this new charged up Dignitas is going to do. Will they prioritize the likes of the Rift Herald and those turrets, or look to start stacking those drags as our other best of fives have seemed to rely on? Let's dive, though, deeper into today's matchup. There's a lot on the line for TSM today, coming off of a tough loss to Golden Guardians. So how do they bring home a win? Their postseason lives are on the line.
I mean, it was a super tough loss yesterday. It's one of those ones where you need to start trying to, triage the problems ASAP. And I think the first thing that people are going to look at is the bot lane. It was the biggest story by far coming away from that matchup. Not just in terms of, oh my God, FBI versus Doublelift, but also what are they doing about Ashe and Caitlyn, as well as the Morgana. They eventually had to ban the Morgana in Game 3, and I think people are going to be, hopefully in TSM, with their one day off, we're able to scrim some games, or at least play some matchups in the bot lane to find answers to that Morgana, because it was a close series, actually. If you remember back to Game 1 and Game 2, TSM had leads. You had this kind of backdoor. It was not as much of a stomp, even though it was a 3-0.
Yeah, and the fact that Golden Guardians had a strategy to kind of neutralize Bjergsen, the 3 bans at the start, the LeBlanc, the Zillion, and the Akali, I think, were the third ones.
Yeah.
The fact that just makes Bjergsen into a farming lane, that's so powerful, because Bjergsen was such a game winner for them, and Damonte did such a good job holding him down. So I really like their strategy, really like their play, but TSM needs to figure out what else they can put Bjergsen on to have an influence.
I mean, Hanser even said it in the interview. They realized if Bjergsen is not carrying this team, TSM is not winning. That's why they threw all their bans that they could at Bjergsen.
So let's talk about then one of the lanes that we think maybe needs to step up. If everything is reliant on Bjergsen, I think a lot of people are going to turn a critical eye to the bot lane, because you have the winningest player of all time in the LCS, Doublelift, down there struggling.
Yeah, he's struggling, and he's going up against his longtime rival now in the bot lane, Aphromoo. They had a couple great years together, getting their first titles in that historic MSG finals. But ever since then, it's actually been more time apart than together. As much as we look back at this as one of the founding bot lanes of North America, they've been fighting each other more often than they were together now. And this is just the latest chapter in the rivalry between these two players.
It's exciting, though, that for me, Afro has actually come back as a premier support. The fact that he was having such a low season last year and then shows up this one with Johnson, or an AD that not a lot of people knew anything about besides his solo queue games, and is actually now contesting the All-Pro, third All-Pro potentially. I mean, didn't make it, but still, I thought Afro has actually been really stepping up, whereas I feel like Doublelift right now, at least judging from the last performance against Golden Guardians, is on a downhill swing.
I mean, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if Aphromoo and Johnson have what it takes to really bring it to the duo of Treats and Doublelift within lane. I mean, we talk about Aphromoo and the success that he's found so far this split, primarily coming on playmaking champions, right? You can see there, of course, a team that doesn't have a positive record isn't going to necessarily look great in any statistical category, but a much better performance out of Aphromoo when he is on those quote-unquote playmakers.
Yeah, so the playmakers being your engaged champions and the non-playmakers being more of your enchanters. But because Dardoch and Viper and Phoenix have found their stride with their champion pool, it actually allowed more flexibility for Afro and Johnson to pick more of the enchanters, which are more lane-focused. So I actually think that if Dignitas has used their preparation well and figured out, hey, we can just put Phoenix on set, Dardoch can play some proper champions, maybe Lilia help out with some engage, because he already showed that, and Viper can hold his own in the top lane. It frees up Afro to play these champions like Soraka, like Deluxe, like Morgana, and really bring the hurt to the bottom lane of TSM, who struggled so much against those enchanters from Golden Guardians. So there is a world where Afro just says, I'm going to just play for lane and win the same way that Golden Guardians did.
Yeah, I really do expect to see that kind of difference in bot lane, where it's not going to be a playmaker, it's going to be these enchanters. Golden Guardians did kind of show a kind of a game plan of how to beat TSM, but more importantly, like Afro, even on these non-playmakers like the Karma, we saw him flash onto a Caitlyn trap just to save his AD, even though in the end it didn't matter at all. It was still like, he's not on a playmaker, but he's still able to make plays. And I think that's a big distinction between that guy.
Yeah, he's back in that playmaking mindset, to say the least. I do want to refocus back towards the mid lane. We talked a lot about Bjergsen and how TSM's success seems to be reliant on him. But Mark, this is actually a matchup we've seen a number of times, Phoenix and Bjergsen, that people might forget.
Yeah, Phoenix came into the league in 2015, which means he and Bjergsen have been clashing for basically 5 years now, and Bjergsen almost always gets the upper hand.
That's 24 games against
24 times these guys have gone head-to-head. And as you can see, Bjergsen usually outperforms him, more wins, better stats, and all that. But I do think this is a time where Phoenix can step up, and he doesn't actually need to outperform Bjergsen. Golden Guardians has given Dignitas a bit of a blueprint for beating them. You already heard Crumbs talking about the bot lane stuff in the mid lane. Demonte picked Ziggs. He did not dominate Bjergsen. He didn't crush him. He held him in lane, went even, was able to contribute in team situations. And I think that's not really Phoenix's playstyle, but if he can do something similar about just being able to stay even with Bjergsen and let the other parts of the map win, that could be a way in.
That's where I think the set comes in, because Bjergsen also tried to play that champion, and Phoenix, known for being easy to pick on from the junglers, you put him on the champion-like set, and now you have playmaking from the mid lane, and you're going to have much more confidence in him to not be killed by these ganks, so you can actually hit a mid-game with a very relevant mid lane champion that isn't easy to take down. So I do think that the pools are somewhat similar, since we saw so much Azir and Set from Bjergsen, and we already know that this is what Phoenix has been playing lately.
Dignitas' uptick this split came with their roster swaps, and for Dignitas, their superstar jungler enters the postseason on his 6th team. So for a quick reminder on his journey, here's Riv with another edition of Oversimplified.
Hey everyone, before he jumps into his first playoff match of the summer, I wanted to do a quick rundown on the history of Dignitas' current jungler in Dardoch, Oversimplified. He made his LCS debut in 2016 spring on Team Liquid, where he won Rookie of the Split but would move on to Immortals a year later, where he'd earn the most Player of the Games that split. Then he jumped to Counterlogic Gaming in summer 2017, where the team would ride at the top of the standings, before another benching. Then he'd have a run on Echo Fox with another series of dominant performances. For one reason or another, Orange wasn't cutting it, so he donned green as he split time on Optic. After a stint in Academy, he'd make his return to the LCS stage for TSM this spring, only to be sent back to Academy in summer for Dignitas. Now, after fighting tooth and nail to get back on a starting roster, he's got his first playoff match where he can knock out TSM. And that's truly all you need to know in Dardoch Oversimplified.
So, oh, how sweet it is to be in a best-of-5 opposite TSM with the opportunity to knock them out of the postseason. No world's hopes if they do it. It's set up, my friends. Mark, I believe you were the one who tweeted out earlier. Is anyone smelling the upsetty spaghetti?
If there's some upsetty spaghetti in the air, it's because Dardoch is the chef. I mean, he has been hulking out. He dragged Dardoch in a lot of ways into this postseason off the back of his play, and they have a lot of tools to play around him. They have a good bot lane. He's playing well. If your soul lanes can stay even and you can get some good drafts that are able to set him up, I think Dardoch has what it takes to actually get the best of TSM. This does feel a little bit closer, and he will be the primary carry, I think, for Dig if they pull it off.
Yeah, and they've already shown that they play Lilia, right? So he's much quicker at adopting new champions. He has a lot more freedom to do that, whereas TSM clearly does not. If you can unlock him and you just give him the opportunity to be a former TSM jungler, to take revenge on TSM, it is so delicious. I am just, it's so good.
It's how they sketty. It's how he left, too. It was seasoned with the, no one wants him, supposedly, thing. And now here he is on Dig with a chance to knock him out of Worlds. It'd be so sweet, I'm sure. The sweetest upsetty spaghetti.
It's going to be some of that al dente upsetty spaghetti.
What are we talking about?
Yeah, I don't know, man. But Dardoch's going to cook it just right as our chef. No, I mean, it's intriguing because he has bounced around so much, and I know that there's been controversy that has, kind of swirled around Dardoch's entire career. But it does finally feel like a moment for him to really shirk that older identity, take down his former team here, and propel a team that seemed doomed midway through the split into postseason hopes and maybe a run at Worlds, really aspirationally. What a turnaround it would be for somebody like him. But ahead of this game, Pastry Time also had the opportunity to chat with Dig's coach ThinkCart about Johnson and this best-of-5 series versus TSM. So let's listen in.
Thank you, Dash. I'm here with Thinkard, the head coach of Dignitas, ahead of their game against TSM. Thinkard, thank you so much for joining me. And here, I honestly wanted to sit down with you and just talk a little bit about Johnson. He has been a newer player to the LCS, but he has been doing really well alongside Afro. So I guess the first things first is, he's been through some academy teams. He's pretty new to the LCS. How did you and the rest of Dignitas end up with Johnson as your AD?
Well, we acquired him from C9 in the Vulcan trade, and basically, as the offseason went on, it became pretty obvious that he could be a franchise piece for our team. And then in the beginning of Spring Split, he just really hit the ground running. It's really rare for a rookie to have that type of confidence and to have that type of skill expression very early on in his career. So right off the bat, we knew that he could be something special.
Was there anything in particular, like trait-wise, that you looked at? You're like, this is a skill that you don't see often. We must start you in the LCS.
Well, he was always very logical when receiving criticism, and he was confident enough to tease Huni, which definitely showed that he had his own confidence and his own trust that he was very good at the game. So those two combinations kind of let me know that he was going to be good.
Right, and of course, he has been very good alongside Afro. Been kind of one of the centerpieces of the team. It's felt like this whole split. What was it like pairing him with such a veteran support? Do you think that helped him at all as a rookie player to kind of move into the LCS, given that he does have such a storied support beside him?
Yeah, for sure. Afro's been every single day from the beginning, been going over wave control, all the different matchups, making sure we're building his matchup knowledge, his wave knowledge, and Afro's been a really integral part in Johnson's development throughout the entire year. So huge credit to Afromu, and obviously huge credit to Johnson.
And then, of course, you are up against TSM, who are playing Doublelift and Treat. It's kind of a similar spot, right? A veteran player versus a newer player that's moved up recently from Academy. So what are your thoughts on that 2v2 matchup? Because it does feel like you certainly can get an edge there, given how well Johnson and Afro have been playing.
Yeah, I would expect Johnson and Afro to definitely be able to hold their own and probably come out ahead in a lot of the matchups. It just comes down to TSM's preparation, because it didn't seem like they were a little bit out prepped going into the season against GGS. So it just depends on where their heads are at when they go back into the series against us.
And of course, without revealing anything, I assume you're feeling very prepared for this matchup.
Yeah, we've had extra days of practice compared to TSM, and we've seen the entire series of their drafting. So we are feeling pretty confident in our prep. Like I said, it just comes down to what adjustments they make.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining me, and best of luck in your series. With that, we are going to throw things back to Dash.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Pastry Time. Citing preparation there at the very end of the interview. And we know in the postseason, particularly in these 4-day crunch periods, that preparation is going to be key. With that added knowledge of what TSM was willing to play in their 3-game loss, I think the question is, what is Dignitas' target? But also, what will TSM have done in their 2 days of prep leading up?
That's the big question. I would hope, with a day off, to look at their game plan and see how they lost. There's a couple things that they can change, most notably figuring out a counter pick to Morgana, because I think that was the biggest issue that they ran into, was that they even with Caitlyn, they couldn't find winning lanes because of that counter pick.
I want to throw your predictions up on the screen just as we continue discussing any final elements here when it comes to this series as a whole. Crumbs, Crumbs with the Dignitas prediction.
Yeah, 3-1.
He's actually going for the spaghetti.
This is not even a close series.
Yeah. One order of spaghetti to the analyst desk, please. For Crumbs, why is it going to happen? 3-1 Dignitas.
Lots of reasons. We've already covered how Dardoch's revenge and all these sweet things, but the reality is TSM looked like complete booty against Golden Gardens. It was awful. The fact that you even thought about putting Bjergsen on set, your only carry, just is appalling. They trashed the bottom lane. It looked so bad. I do think that Dignitas is a solid matchup in the bottom lane. Their mid lane is going to be fine with their champion select, and then Dardoch can have a really good time picking a lot of new champions in the jungle as well. Beyond that, Dignitas has more preparation on a new patch than the TSM that already looked like their preparation against Golden Gardens was not good in the first place. So they have more data to work with, and they should just be able to execute on it because you have had more time to play and experiment.
What's your prep for emulating FBI? He's the best bot laner in the league.
Your champion.
It's not just the strategy. The way the players on GGS played was what made the strategy work.
He won both sides of a matchup. You can't just download that off a spreadsheet and we'll just win both sides off the matchup.
You also can't count on 1,300 gold not being spent as well. So there's some things that are unaccountable for.
It could happen again.
Just
You might take
hope
it.
the
Could happen.
ADC bases and forgets the BF sword. Okay. Just quick hit. Probably. Why do you think TSM's going to take it?
So I do think TSM got exposed. I think they can fix this Morgana problem because I don't think it's a real problem. Hopefully Doublelift gets a bit of a wake-up call, and Bjergsen goes, just like Crumb said, I'm not playing set. I'm going to play a carry. Let's play around Bjergsen again.
Boom. There it is. We have our thoughts from the analyst desk. It's time to kick things off for the lower bracket and hand it over to Captain Flowers and to Zale for game one.